Welcome, Rebel Nation. Thanks for tuning in to this podcast. We're going to cover an odd topic today. I'll be frank with you. This is not in the normal wheelhouse of things we do here on my yet to be named podcast, but we're going to talk cybersecurity. And before you click pause and move on to the Joe Rogan show or something, I want you to think about what your potential liability is in this world. And I want to challenge you with you're way more vulnerable than you think you are. But fortunately, we've got two experts on the podcast today. I want to introduce to you Jimmy and Jacob. They sort of exist in two different worlds around cybersecurity, both in the prevention of and then what happens when it happens. So introduce yourself, guys. Jimmy, do you want to start? Kind of give us your background and what you do in the cybersecurity world?
Yeah, no, thanks, Sean. So I'm Jimmy Comer. I am the owner of RBI Services. I am the insurance agent. We offer accounting and payroll and then insurance. And so I take care of the insurance. So been in the insurance world for a while, and cybersecurity is something that we're starting to see more of an issue with. And I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about how we can help your folks in the nation take care of themselves.
Well, we appreciate it. Before last week or 2 weeks ago when Clark Brown mentioned this, I didn't know cybersecurity insurance existed. So we'll come back to the services you offer and the types of policies offered, because that's huge. And I think that's, just like your general liability and in some cases, depending on what you do, errors and omissions, I think it's hugely important. And I'm a big believer in insure to the max, if not even over-insure yourself. That's what it's there for. Jacob, what do you do in this world?
Well, I am the Preventative. I'm the one that offers antivirus software, backups, and just cleaning everything up when something happens. There's no way to make perfection with IT, because we could sit there and say you have the best things in the world, but next week someone in China, Russia, Ukraine will find an exploit and be able to take over everything we put in place. So that's where our partnership with Jimmy comes into play, of like being able to offer a safety net, because we can promise you something, but the way tech works is never a known what's going to happen next week.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about some typical types of intrusion where, let's say, I do $1.5 million. I'm an owner operator of a restoration company. Where are my vulnerabilities? Where would these attacks come in?
The biggest vulnerability is literally the human workforce nowadays. It's rarely is anyone going to target your business directly, because they don't even know your business exists, other than maybe seeing you sitting at Starbucks, Panera, a hotel convention, something like that, with your laptop that might have your business's sticker on it. That's the most they know about you, is that you're sitting there with a laptop. But if they send out 10,000 or 1 million emails and get in your inbox with that one phishing attack that you open mistakenly, that's how they get in. Is they're just hoping with volume that they're going to get that one that has that one QuickBooks file, the one Excel file, the one insurance claim form, that they're going to pay, a couple $1,000s to get back what could potentially be that $1,000 upwards of an entire $50,000 for whatever the project's worth, kind of thing. They're not looking for that one quick payday.
Right. So about once a week, I get the UPS Quantum View shipment tracking email. Unfortunately, I'm a G Suite user, so it's a Google Enterprise powered email. It filters those into my spam, but I was looking yesterday. I had 3 clearly malicious emails in my spam folder, and I would imagine with all the different email clients out there, not every client is really good about email client that is really good about filtering these potential huge security breaches out from the general inbox. So those types of emails are the ones where someone gets it, they think it's someone sharing a UPS tracking number they need to confirm and go pick up, or a QuickBooks file and they're clicking those, and that initiates that software install to get into the system and take it over. Is that what you're describing?
Exactly. That's like the number one attack vector right now. There's occasionally like finding a thumb drive or SD card for a camera laying in a parking lot and taking it home. Like, oh, cool, free SD card. You plug it in, and that's got a payload on it. Those are the most common attack vectors I've seen recently. There's always the old school, just you go to the wrong website. It's always going to happen, but it's rare. It's getting rarer and rarer every day, especially with like Google Chrome and Firefox browsers that they have security built into them now that block most of those sites. But like you said, Google has filtered most of that stuff out. Google is, it costs money every month to use it, but it is probably one of the best security prevention systems there is. They have the best search algorithms and machine learning system that's known right now that they've tailored to work with email for spam filtering, and in that process, phishing attack filtering.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have several local businesses that have been contacting me recently because they've fallen victim to phishing attacks that they're using Microsoft Outlook in the cloud. They just let it in. They don't filter. They don't have the capability to do it. And oddly enough, there's like some very small email providers out there that have the equivalent of Google, but no one hears about them because they hear Microsoft or Google and go with either one of those. But there's better stuff out there that is equivalent to Google, but a little less expensive.
Sure. Does Microsoft Outlook still work on the blacklist, whitelist feature? Do you have to manually enter in those potentially malicious senders? Like, do they filter? They don't filter nearly to the extent that a Google would or another, smaller, more specialized email client would, right?
Right. They are just going off of like the publicly available blacklists mainly. And occasionally they'll block a phishing attack if it's large enough that it's gotten into one of the databases somewhere.
Okay.
But that's when it's mass scale and they know what they're looking for versus, oh, this looks weird to the algorithm, to the robots and everything that's running the algorithms. But it's like funny that you mentioned Microsoft and the blacklist and everything. Microsoft's one method of preventing spam and bad emails is they'll just drop it. Like, you'll never know that the email never made it to somebody because their algorithm and system has decided this is a bad email. So they just drop it and never inform that it never got delivered or anything like that. So if you have a customer that uses Hotmail, Outlook, anything like that, and you're trying to get in contact with them and they never respond, there's a good possibility they've never actually seen your email and it never made it to them because your email address looks strange to Microsoft.
Right. And it's, some of the stuff I kind of laugh at because I grew up with Netscape Navigator. That was my first, I got online in about 1995. And so it was Netscape Navigator and IRC. And I had a good friend that he spent hundreds of dollars a month on his AOL connection. And so I look at all that stuff as highly outdated. And I think, who still uses Yahoo Mail and AOL and some of these just old dinosaur mail provider systems? But a lot of people still do. They've had the same username they've had for 15, 20 years. So there is that. I think there's probably a segment of the rebel group specifically that are probably more vulnerable to these types of attacks than maybe some other users would be, only because they've stuck with sort of old familiar clients and processes, right?
Yeah. So ironically enough, I probably created my Yahoo email about the time you were on Netscape, about 95 or so. And if it's something I don't necessarily need to talk to somebody regularly, that's the email address I'll fill in. And all the junk, you're correct. The junk that comes in, it's amazing. My daughter actually sent me a college paper to look over. I said, "Where'd you send it?" She said, "Your Yahoo account." And Yahoo actually sent it to spam. But meanwhile, I had a offer from Russian mail order brides sending my inbox. I went, beautiful Yahoo. This is why Gmail gets my serious email.
Right.
So, yeah, no, you're correct.
Yeah.
Those guys just have not kept up with the times.
So let's say, we've got an office manager. She accidentally opens up one of these emails. What's a typical scenario, and then what is a worst case scenario for the business at this point?
That's a really
I think, oh crap.
Yeah, that's
where it starts.
And
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
the version. Because it's once you open that email, you have no possibility of knowing what the payload was. It could literally just be something as simple as they're going to infect your machine and use it to mine Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. But you have to automatically assume the worst, that they have installed keyloggers and Trojans and screen grabbers, and they're going to be watching and recording everything you do on that device.
So then that's where we would step in. Say your machine is affected and starts affecting other machines that are outside your company, which that's something we've seen here recently. If you're held liable for that, that's where the insurance will step in and help cover you. So say it's determined that you need to provide credit reporting, or you are fined by a government entity. That's where insurance will step in. Also, the insurance will help protect, say your bank account's raided. Well, the insurance can step in and help you with that as well. So that's where you get past that firewall, which I can testify for Jacob. He puts a great firewall. He caught something on my system here recently, and it told me back out, and I did.
Yesterday, in fact, too.
Yeah, yesterday. But if it gets around that firewall, you have a problem. That's where you want to make sure you have a good cyber policy in place. Something I would encourage everybody is start considering it to be just as important as your workers' comp, your general liability, as you said, possibly if you have E&O. The policies are actually fairly affordable. Depending on the size of your company, my company, we're a little small. It's about $600 a year, but because we deal with people's names, socials, addresses, we are a prime target for anybody that wants to go and open up all sorts of lines of credit. And so we feel pretty good about ourselves. We've got Jacob on the front line. We've got our safety net, and if by chance we're ever breached, then Jacob comes in and takes care of things.
And to add on what he's saying, though, basically is that you might be sitting here thinking, well, I don't have anything that would matter. Yeah, they're looking just to get that quick payoff with a ransomware attack or something like that, or just watching what you're doing in hopes that it pays off. And I know a lot of construction guys have rental properties that they've bought and invested in, so they rent them out. Think about every time you have a tenant apply, you have a social security number, driver's license number, former addresses, references, all that. That's personal information that you're now liable for if you get attacked. And email is one of the most insecure systems in the world. It's essentially, think about putting a postcard in the postal service. Whatever you wrote on that, anyone that touches that postcard can look at. If you want to secure it, you have to put it in an envelope and put it before you put the stamp on there, but you can't do that with email. There's no way around it. So you get that one phishing attack that gets into your email, you're liable if you have one social security number or driver's license number in there.
And I'll extend that metaphor just a bit more. Imagine if that postcard had the ability to unlock your house and give that criminal full access to everything in your home. That's what's happening with a hard drive, a local server you have set up if that attack comes in. So we covered sort of, I think the worst case would be phishing attack. They come in, they wipe out the bank account, they steal socials.
The keystroke logger.
Or keystroke loggers, things like that. But what about the simple, and I see this a lot in the news, especially with local city governments seem to be the most apt for these, just the ransomware. Do you have numbers? Can you talk averages of what these, these, I don't know, I hate to call them hackers. I feel like hackers are nicer than what these guys are doing. But do you have numbers of what that average ransom type attack cost?
It varies by, just to get the ransom, if you're going to pay the ransom, it varies by the price of Bitcoin for that time period. I've seen them be anywhere from like a couple $100 to where it's like, it hurts, but it's not that bad. But we've also had one customer or one potential customer we had to turn down because there was nothing we could do at this point, that called, and their ransom was in the $150,000 range, and it was a small manufacturing facility. Like, we're talking 15 employees.
Yeah, I mean, you're referring like City of Atlanta. I cannot remember exactly how much they were looking for. Boeing, Under Armour. To me, a lot of times those guys hit those because that's more of a look what I hit. It's the small mom and pop companies that are really vulnerable. They're the ones where the 21st century Jesse James are trying to hit that quick $5,000-$10,000 and move on. And if your business is shut down for a couple of days, you're more likely to jump on and just pay the money so you can get your software back.
And on top of that, it's like these ransomware attacks they don't just encrypt one file. They encrypt every file that you have on your system. And I've heard it a few times. Well, I just need this one Excel book and everything else I can live without. It doesn't matter. Just to get that one file, you have to buy it all.
Yeah.
And, I've also heard, why can't you just crack this one file for us? There are so many combinations for the key to get into that file that it would take. I wish I could show the number, because it's would literally be the heat death of the universe before you ever cracked it.
That's actually pretty comical. So
like, an extinction of every living thing.
Right. Before that, you find the right set of numbers to unlock that code. Yeah, these guys are clearly smart. Jimmy, I think you're right about this is sort of the new Jesse James. 150 years ago, it was, we knocked off the Wells Fargo stagecoach carrying, whatever. And nowadays they do go after those more public companies just as a notch on their belt.
Yeah.
But the bread and butter business are guys like me and guys like you. And that's where they're just living their very comfortable lifestyle.
Yeah. And everybody's vulnerable to it. I mean, if you have, whether a storefront or you're strictly online, everybody's vulnerable. A business of all types, it doesn't matter who you are. There's information there to be taken. Jacob and I actually both happen to be sitting on the board of a nonprofit, and this particular nonprofit was hacked, and it took Jacob 14 hours to clean the mess up. There was nothing for them to get. It was nothing more than them being an irritant. But 14 hours of Jacob's time, he finally got it all cleaned out. We got the correct security on there. This was pre-Jacob security on there. This was not Jacob's fault, but now Jacob's on there. But just to give you an idea, it was 14 hours of his time. If we did not have Jacob, he said it would have been about $5,000 just of billable hours from him that, a small nonprofit, that puts them out.
And just to give an example of that on pricing and everything, like our pricing, like $5,000 for 14 hours worth of work, that's on the lowest end of the spectrum. Because I started my company mainly just so I didn't have to see people get ripped off anymore. The average going rate for a company that does nothing but responds to cyber incidents, they're going to charge $25,000 just to talk to them, with about $250 to $500 an hour billable afterwards.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, but this is an ongoing problem from the insurance perspective. I just read an article last week. It's expected by 2020, over $6 billion in premium to be collected by 2020. Put that on a scale, general liability is about $100 billion. So it's still small, but it's growing. That's the fastest segment that we're seeing in insurance of growth.
That's amazing. And it's still, you pay about what, $50 a month for your premium. You said you're a small company. If I'm a 6 to 8 person restoration company, let's say I do 1.2 million a year. What I could expect to pay like under $100 a month for this coverage?
I would say it's probably $1,200 to $1,500. Of course, we're in Virginia. It's going to vary a little bit by state. Each company is going to vary a little bit, but I think $1,200 to $1,500 is a good estimate. And like I tell the contractors, you just need to include this as part of your cost when you're making your estimates. You just need to start rolling that in, just like your E&O, just like your workers' comp. It's part of the expense of doing business.
Right. I get that. And on Jacob, on your side, what does preventative service look like month to month?
It depends on the size of the organization mainly, but the starting plans for like the one person shops, the one computer and everything like that, it's $25 a month. And
that's nothing.
That includes antivirus, 5 hours of support of where we're going to help you out if you just have issues. Like if you have formatting issues with Word, we're going to do our best to help you out with those 5 hours. Cloud storage so that you can replace Dropbox with our services, because we actually care about you. You're not just a customer calling in. We're going to tell you, yeah, we don't really care. We're going to help you. And CRM software is included with that. So it's like for $25, you're actually getting probably about $75 worth of service from us.
And that I always equate things to Starbucks pricing. That's 5 lattes. So if 25 is too rich for your blood and you're a listener, just cut out a couple lattes in the month and you'll be able to afford it. I know in my experience, I've worked with restorers for 10 years now, and most restorers have, they're generally referred to as the IT guy or the web guy. And that's sort of the de facto, he runs Ethernet cable. He sets up my computer. He fixes it when I break it. Oh, he also does my website, my SEO, and 10,000 other things. Can the average IT guy or quote unquote web guy do what you do, Jacob, or is that more of a specialized? That's something that they actually need an expert to come in and do?
On the general side of like a protection plan, a general IT person can do it, and I say that is a lot. It's like I always hear the phrase of like, well, my nephew can do it or something like that. You're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah.
The reason our prices are so low is because we've built everything in house, and we pass those savings back on rather than buying a 1-800 number for the support for everything we have and we provide. But for the incident response, it takes someone to be able to think on that level of what they did, and knowing that we're not just going to be running a virus scan on your computer and saying, okay, it's done. Most of these phishing payloads that come through email, antivirus can't find them because they mask themselves as common applications on a computer. Like I've seen notepad.exe, just a standard notepad application, be a phishing vector. They've replaced it with the screen grabber and the keylogger. Or Microsoft Word has been infected with it. So Word looks legit, but it's actually infected. So at that point, it takes someone to actually stop and think what needs to be done and contain it. It's like the entire office needs to be put in quarantine, basically, and segmented out into proper clean versus dirty networks until everything's taken care of.
And what about the guys who use McAfee or AVG or Malwarebytes? Do those programs catch any of this stuff, most of it? What's your experience with that?
It's a firm possibly they might catch it. Odds are they won't.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things is like Google, like I was just singing their song just a minute ago, but they won't catch it usually until someone's already fallen victim of it and they've seen it happen.
Right.
It's one of those things that you can't really predict how the code and the executable and payloads are going to look until it's been known that it's happened once. It's horrible to say, but you have to have that one person to fall victim to do it. You have that one martyr that falls on the sword for everyone.
Right. I mean, I see that with the Google spam folder. At the top of that spam folder, it talks about they've almost crowdsourced their ability to spot spam based on other people falling victim to it. So I think you're right there. And I know most people use some sort of quote unquote, antivirus protection, but new viruses, new attacks, new things are being developed hour by hour by hour. There's a lot of ingenious people with lots of time on their hands and terrible motivations that are cooking these things up every day. So That was a good answer. I think you said maybe, possibly. I think that
great insurance answer right there. I just
right.
maybe.
Good firm, maybe.
Yeah.
It's
So,
around me long enough.
just out of curiosity, where do many of these attacks originate from? What part of the world?
The world. That's the thing is, like, there's no telling where it's going to come from. Everyone wants to point the finger at Russia or China because it's what you hear, but we run a honeypot network in the background too. We have almost equally the number of attacks come from America and France and Germany and Africa and the Middle East. There's no telling where it's going to come from. The internet's global. It's going to come globally. There's no one place it's going to come from.
I do have my Nigerian prince uncle who's still trying to send me money. So,
I've been waiting on my paycheck for years now. He's really slow. I don't know if the mail service isn't good there.
20 years I've been waiting.
Yeah. Now, what about this? May be outside the wheelhouse, but I know I was a victim of a script attack on multiple websites about 4.5 years ago. And it was simply because I built sites on WordPress. This is back in the day when I was doing pay-per-click management and building websites for clients. And then I got smart and found an expert. And it was, I was landing in Orlando. My entire family had put together a Disney family vacation. And when we went wheels down at the Orlando airport and I flipped on my phone, I realized all of my websites were down. And I had thousands and thousands and thousands of pay-per-click dollars riding on these websites for clients. So I had a friend who was pretty smart and got everything fixed and then closed the back door and locked it and hid it. But is that something that you do as well on the website side of things to prevent and fix scripting attacks?
It is. That is, like Jimmy mentioned earlier, I'm on the board of one of the nonprofits. That's what they got hit with. Scripting attacks. And just those are kind of hard to mitigate or prepare for, really. They're easy to mitigate. You restore from a backup.
Right.
And that's the root of all of our services, is making sure that there are backups to restore from, be it a website, be it to a corporate network. If you don't have that, you're going to be victim no matter what. But for the websites, it's now that this nonprofit's website is on our systems, it's backed up hourly.
Wow.
Right. And for websites to add that onto your plan, that's $5 extra a month. And we don't meter anything on top of that. But you get hourly backups with a database and everything like that. So if something happens, we're going to roll it back. And we're also going to take it personally because it's on our systems and we're managing it. So it's not going to be you're waiting 4 hours for someone to open it, answer a ticket. We're going to take care of it as soon as we notice it, because we're going to actively monitor your website too, make sure nothing's happening to it.
And let me put the terminology script attack may not make sense to some people. I'll explain what happened in my situation. When I pulled up those, so I'm sitting in the aircraft, and I'd gotten a bunch of text messages from a bunch of very unhappy clients. And so as I pulled up the website, it was like I think it was the Malaysian Liberation Army or something. And it was it looked like it was built in about 1996. It was all Flash, and they totally just took over the domain. And all it was a facade over that domain. But think about, for my clients, most of them, that's 50% of their business each month is through the website and digital advertising. So think about if that's down even for a day and you're in the middle of a storm, and I'm speaking to you, the listener, the restorer, think about the impact that can have on your business. And it typically comes from a site that's built on WordPress that's not updated regularly, that doesn't do backups. And where if it's on an older build of WordPress, that access to the backend admin area of that site that's public information. All they need is a username and password to creep right in and do their dirty work. So those backdoors are rarely hidden on especially older built WordPress sites. So that's what I mean by script attack. That's when someone comes in and completely takes over your website and is expecting something before you get that website back under your control. So think about the impact that can have on your business. It may be a day, maybe a week, maybe a month. So Jacob, what you do on the preventative side, that's all stuff you can do remotely, right? You don't just serve Richmond, Virginia, correct?
All right. We actually have customers all over the United States.
Awesome.
All right. We're headquartered in Richmond, and then most of my engineers are scattered throughout. Like I have guys in San Antonio, Houston, Culpeper, Virginia. They're all over the place. So we don't necessarily have to be on site to support you. If you want us to do physical work, we obviously got to figure out how to get there. But, just managing your network and stuff like that, we can work with someone remotely and tell them, okay, install our equipment this way, and then we'll monitor and take care of everything for you without ever coming on site, basically.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. Jimmy, what about, I think many people may think general liability coverage covers cyber, but that's not the case, is it?
So general liability, the companies a few years back started giving it an add-on, a little bit of cyber coverage. But the reality is it's a Band-Aid that requires a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. And, you may have a $10,000 limit on it. Well, if you have a serious attack, 10,000 is not going to go very far. Yeah. And so that's why those cyber policies are so important, as having a true cyber policy. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was sometimes going to make sure, because, if your viewers are sitting there pulling out their policy and they go, oh, see, here's the cyber right here on my general liability. Go take a better look. You'll see it's very limited. The things they will cover is also very limited. You need a true cyber policy to fully protect you. And again, I know everybody hates insurance, but you love it when you need it.
Exactly. And I tell you, of all the audiences you've presented this information to, our audience should be completely aware of policy exclusions and policy limits, because we deal with it every day with homeowners, where they're underinsured or they're uninsured in some case, and then we've got to say, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, so what you're responsible for is X because your insurance didn't cover it. So this should be a no-brainer for the audience.
Your folks have run into, they have a water backup from a toilet. They get there to the house, and the customer didn't have that endorsement for water and sewer backup. That's not a broken pipe. That's water and sewer backup. So all the money comes out of that homeowner's policy. So that's a great analogy right there, that having the proper coverage is always needed.
And add to that too is one of the things is that you have to watch out on the insurance policies in general is it's not just a free ticket to ride. If I have the cyber insurance policy, I don't need any other services. It's not going to cover if you were running with a password of 123. They're going to check and make sure you weren't running with like slick tires on the interstate when you crashed. It's not just going to cover everything just because you have it.
And another trend I think you will start seeing for these cyber policies, they will want to see what you as a company are taking on. So I believe the state of New York might be starting to look at certification of certain.
Right. The state of New York just had regulations go into place. It's only limited to certain industries right now. But if you don't have a chief security officer, chief technology officer, and or chief information officer that does constant cybersecurity audits and information and training within the company, you are very, very liable and going to be fined heavily in the state.
And so something that I've always noticed, if something occurs in California, Texas, Florida, or New York, other states are watching. Right. And it would not surprise me if it starts coming on board. So that being said, insurance companies, I could see them jumping on with, what are you doing to try and prevent this, to keep the losses at a minimum?
And with that too, look at what's been going on in Congress the last 2 days with Facebook CEO testifying. That's like,
talk about the most awkward interview ever recorded. And then I actually, my wife showed me a picture of the poor guy yesterday. He's on a booster seat, and I'm 5'7". I'd be on a booster seat if I was in front of Congress too. But yeah, that is almost pain. I watched an hour of it 2 nights ago, and it is it is like nails on a chalkboard, the entire thing.
I heard that they had to explain to certain senators how Facebook actually makes money, which I went, that had to be.
Or how the internet works.
Or how the internet works, yeah.
But that's like a prime example of, they're questioning Facebook now. And, it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you're on. Congress is not going to be wise when it comes to technology, as they proved in the interview. So, like that one law they passed trying to get Facebook for data privacy very well could affect you because you have a social security number somewhere in your email. It's just something to think about. It's like, we know they don't do the best practices on laws.
For sure. And this whole idea of what California, New York, Texas, and Florida, I think you said, about having that person in place that does that as a full-time gig. That might sound, go ahead.
Too.
It can be what?
It can be fractional. You just have to have that person named on the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, it's only occurring in New York. What I was saying is, any one of those 4 states, when something major change occurs, the other states tend to start watching. So
without a doubt, yeah, longtime California resident, absolutely. I totally agree with that. But that shouldn't be. That may sound radical, but it shouldn't be, because carriers expect their insureds to engage in preventative maintenance, and they hold them to a certain degree of due diligence to prevent damage and then mitigate it once it occurs. So it's not unreasonable for a carrier one day to say, well, yeah, you've got to have an alphanumeric password that's more than 12 characters and has punctuation. That's not terribly unreasonable.
You need to have the services like Jacob offers. I can see that coming eventually.
It may.
Yeah. And again, it's to help to keep the cost down. That's, if you just don't put those preventative steps in place, you think the insurance is expensive now, just wait. $6 million to me seems a little low as far as what could potentially happen.
I agree.
It's the old thing, an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure.
Yeah. Hurricane hits, the house's heavy set value. Cyber attacks hit, the set values will be set by the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah.
Insurance companies watch everything very closely, as I'm sure your audience is very aware. And it's, I do think that's what eventually in the next couple of years will be the steps they'll start taking.
Jacob, let me ask you, I was just thinking about this, mobile devices. I know, because I do pay-per-click advertising for stores, and in most markets, mobile searches are more than 80% of all searches. Usually because obviously we're targeting emergency services, and a homeowner doesn't have time to go crack open the laptop or fire up the desktop. They're pulling out their phone, they're asking for help. Do you have any kind of services to prevent against phishing attacks or different types of ransomware coming via a mobile device?
We do not, but that's one of the things is like mobile devices are probably the most secure devices you can have right now.
Okay.
It's really rare, and it's not impossible. It's just rare to see any kind of attack hit a mobile device. And this is the thing, I hate to say it, but iPhones are the most secure mobile devices there are. Because if you install any application on there, you have to give it permission.
Right.
If it tries to do anything, you're going to have to give it permission. So if you're just sitting there clicking OK no matter what, yeah, it's going to be insecure. But if you read the prompt that it gives you, it's like, why does Facebook need access to my contacts? Or this random game, why does it need access to my camera? That should tip you off something's weird, and you should probably back out. And that's the reason iPhones are the most secure. Android phones are so horribly. Hey, I just recently switched about 6 months ago because I was an Android person all the way. But Android phones are so fragmented that every company, if you have an LG phone, if you have a Motorola phone, if you have a insert random brand here, they each have their own custom version that Google doesn't control.
Right.
So when was the last time you got a security update on your phone that wasn't one of the main lines? And
This is why I switched to a Google Pixel 2. I wanted to be on the bleeding edge of every update. I was so tired of having Verizon wait 6 months. Literally before I got this phone, I was 6 months behind on security updates through my Moto Z Force. So I had a flagship phone, paid full retail for it, but I had Motorola and Lenovo to an extent bottlenecking security updates. And then I had Verizon bottlenecking it on top of that. So I said, no more. I'm going to go as close to the manufacturer of the software as I can. And fortunately, about every 3 weeks, I get a security update.
Right. That's the reason that I do have an Android phone as my bat phone for when stuff goes wrong in the company. It's a Nexus 6P because it gets an update every month with security update. But if it was any other brand, there's a good chance you're never going to see an update for it. Yeah,
especially at Samsung. They seem to be the worst on rolling out updates because they have their own skin on it. And it's interesting about iPhones, and I would say, I mean, that's probably the majority of our audience. But iPhones have become a little bit more susceptible to these attacks over the years. I know for a long time, they existed in such a tight, closed ecosystem that it was highly rare, but I'm seeing a little bit more and more they're open to attacks. But it's interesting about the mobile device being the most secure.
It's just because permissions, like that Apple's made it to where you have to have a permission to do anything on the phone. So that's the reason they're secure. It's like with a laptop or something like that. Think about corporate America versus your home computer. Mm-hmm. You know, at corporate, you have to get permission from IT to install this one little application.
Right.
And that's why, because they have it locked down so tight that getting hit by a phishing attack or something like that is nearly impossible. Not impossible, but nearly.
Right.
And usually these companies that you see and the headlines that are being hit, they don't have proper policies in place to prevent it.
Yeah.
You know, they've opened it up just a little bit to make life a little simpler versus having to go through and install an application for somebody.
So the last thing I want to cover, just to talk about potential vulnerability our audience face. For you guys and gals out there, think about the number of emails you receive in a day from basically strangers. You're communicating with homeowners, you're communicating with adjusters and desk adjusters, you're exchanging PDFs, you're exchanging photos, JPEGs, and things like that on a daily, hour-by-hour basis. Understand the liability in that and the potential risk for disaster. When Clark first brought up this topic, within 30 seconds, I just sort of saw the whole picture of how vulnerable we are. So with that, guys, how can the audience get in touch with you if they have more questions? And I think what I'll do is once I post up the video, I'll try to open up comments in the group so we can get some of those conversations going. I'm sure this is going to get some ideas rolling around in heads. But Jacob, how can the audience get a hold of you first?
I can be reached by just the phone at 804-729-8999. And our web address is umtech.io.
How do you spell that?
It's umbtech.io.
Okay. And Jimmy, what about you? How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so my phone number would be 804-912-3501. And my email address is jimmy@rbisvcs.com. Or if you're in the Central Virginia area, just reach out to me. We'll sit down, have a cup of coffee, and talk.
I think it's for me too. I'm always open for a cup of coffee and just to talk about what you need. And my email address is jacob.adkins@umtech.io.
Okay. And I'll try to add those. I'll at least tag you guys in the post and try to add that information. Guys, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know this, like I said, this was sort of outside of our normal subject matter, but I think I'm kind of a tech and gadget nerd, technology nerd, and I follow this stuff. And even having this conversation with Clark over the past few days, I've realized how vulnerable I am. So Jacob, Jimmy, I'm sure you'll be hearing from me. But this is a message we got to get out to the audience. I recently heard of, I'm not sure if they're within the Rebel community or if it's a friend of a friend, but a phishing attack that cost in the high six figures to rectify the situation, and it's still an ongoing thing. But you talk about absolutely crippling this company. I can't imagine walking in on a Monday morning and realizing that all those ad dollars I've been collecting from clients and all those service fees were just gone, or being held hostage. I can't imagine that would it would devastate the business. Maybe not permanently, but certainly it would be a couple of really hard weeks to come back from. So this is incredibly important stuff. What you guys do both on the prevention side and the OCRAP side is very important. Are you guys involved in the Rebel group? You guys are members, correct?
We were both made honorary members of the Rebel group.
All right.
Clark added us, and we appreciate that.
Okay.
Watching what you guys are doing, that's great. Love y'all come together as a community. And I'll just say, if you got questions about insurance in general, I'll be happy to talk to the Rebel group.
And questions about tech in general too. I'm always more than happy to share knowledge.
Well, that's awesome. That's exactly how I got involved in the group in the first place. Just my little skill set. I started answering questions, and then 100 more questions come, and they realize, hey, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. So I appreciate you guys being open to that. We'll get some conversations going, and hopefully you guys help out some businesses. I know you're going to be helping out mine soon. I'm seeing all my landmines around me that I need to mitigate. So I appreciate it. Folks, thanks for tuning in. If the video version is, if you want an audio version, we'll post that up. It usually comes a couple days after. We try to master it and get the audio just right for your long drives. But otherwise, stay tuned. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to have some more unique topics, sort of outside of what we normally do. But the goal is just educate and open up your field of vision just a bit more, so that you are you're covering those liabilities and you're growing and thriving. So thanks again, Rebel Nation. Thanks again, Jimmy, Jacob. I appreciate the time. And
thank you.
Thank you.
Best wishes to the Rebel Nation. I always like to hear you covering those liabilities.
Yes. Take care, guys.
Thank you now.
Thank you.